Hello everybody. So since I'm aware that this video has gone up a little bit later than intended, I have written you a short song about apologising, and I would like to play it to you now. Sorry. Since you know it's coming, let's get the goblin count out the way first. In the last 2 months I painted 21 grots, bringing my grand total up to 70. Which means I'm currently in the rare situation of having no more Gretchen to paint. I mean, sure, I have other models that are also little goblins, but I mean I've run out of regular grots, which is a first for this year, although I'm sure this will be rectified soon. I also finished off my 4 remaining looters. Once again, these are pretty much the same as the previous ones I've shown, just assembled from slightly different bits. Now the whole squad is done, I'm really happy with how they've come out. Although I'm no stranger to converting or scratch building, normally I'm not building entire squads from wholly inappropriate parts, so it's really neat to have such a unique squad. Maybe one day, once my bits box has replenished a bit, I'll build another 6 to make the squad up to its maximum size, but for now I'm calling them done. And speaking of custom squads, ever since I saw the Age of Sigmar Squig hoppers, I've wanted to get some. I didn't know what I would use them for, but I knew I wanted some. In the end, I've settled on using them as commandos, and here's my initial test model. This one is a pretty simple conversion, with the melee weapon replaced with a slugger and the foot attached to something more 40k than the mushrooms and stuff they're usually attached to. Which does mean that it is a little bit delicate around that pin joint, but that's just the price you pay when you convert sometimes. I think this model comes across a bit too just a fantasy model with a gun, but this one was just a test one, so, you know, I can correct that in later models. Like I did with this next one. Here we have the knob for the commando squad. To represent his increased stat line, I made this conversion more elaborate, beefing up the metal jaw on the squig since it needs to represent a power claw, and adding plating to the side of the squig, as well as making a full backpack for the rider and giving him a boss pole. Really, I just needed him to stand out from the rest of the squad, which I think he will. The squigs themselves are pretty fun to paint, even if I'm not really making them particularly fancy. Plus, being purple makes them perfect as commandos, what with that being the orc sneaky colour. I've got 8 more of these to paint, so, you know, you'll see more of these in future videos. So here's something I haven't done in these videos yet, show off a completely non-Games Workshop model. This is a Stormtrooper from the Star Wars Legion game. Longfang, my friend and podcast co-host, got me some Stormtroopers for my birthday since, well, I was talking about wanting to paint them up as Imperial Remnant, so thank you. As planned, I went with a more weathered look based on the Remnant forces from The Mandalorian, so it's basically a lot of sponge weathering. But I mixed in red patterns, which will be different on each trooper, just to set them apart from regular Imperials. If you're interested in how these models are to work with, well, they're made of a softer, more rubbery material than your standard GW fare, so the mould lines are more awkward to remove, but they're not too bad in that regard anyway, so it's mostly fine. The detail's pretty great too, this was honestly a pleasure to paint. The arms are kinda weird since they're a solid piece that you have to kind of bend to fit in the slots, which is a little nerve-wracking, but due to their rubbery nature it's fine. So yeah, I'll work through the rest of the squad soon. The last few videos have contained old dreadnoughts, so I couldn't just break the streak so soon. This is an epic scale Chaos Dreadnought, one that uses the Space Crusade design, and it is adorable. I painted this one up with a kind of Nurgle looking colour scheme, and if you're wondering how small it is, well, the base it's on is actually a penny. And here it is next to a full-size dreadnought of the same design. Also, here is it next to a Primaris, since I suppose that's a more relatable comparison since not everyone has a Space Crusade dreadnought hanging around. But yeah, I bought a handful of these on a whim, and don't ask me what I'm going to do with the others, I didn't think that far ahead. People who watch the Codex Compliance series will know that we recently did a video on Space Fleet, the precursor to Battlefleet Gothic, and once we finished with the video I thought it would be fun to paint the ships. These first ones are Imperial Gothic battleships, a design that would later become the basis for the Furious Abyss in the Horus Heresy. Painted these to vaguely match the colours of the plastic they originally were, so the red one was red and the white one was blue, hence its blue accents. The most notable thing here is that although I rarely use contrast paints, I picked up some of the Apothecary White for these to use like a wash, and wow is it fantastic for that. It's always been difficult to add depth to white without it looking dingy, but this does the job fantastically. 10 out of 10, big fan. I also painted up the Eldar Wraith ships in a similar style, although these weren't based on the colours of plastic they're just whatever I felt like. The second one required a little bit of restoration work on it since it only had one sail and the other one was broken. I pinned the broken one in easy enough and made a replacement sail from plasticard and green stuff. It's not super neat when you look at it closely, but it does the job. All in all, these were a fun change of pace, and it was nice to paint some things simply rather than adding in too much detail. These are just for a board game after all. So I mentioned earlier that I do a podcast with Longfang. It's called Men with Funny Heads. It's about various sci-fi nonsense. Go check it out if that seems fun to you. Well, we did an episode about the Doctor Who episode Dalek a little while ago, and I may have spent some time gushing about the special weapons Dalek. Well, generous bugger that he is, Longfang ordered me a miniature version of one from Warlord Games, and here it is. Unusually for me, I tried to paint it like the one we see on screen, so it's a dirty and worn version of the Imperial Dalek colour scheme. They don't normally come on bases, but I went ahead and threw it on a 32mm one. After all, it's made of metal and I didn't want it to chip when I'm just, putting it down on things. Plus, in my head, miniatures of that size just belong on bases anyway. Next up is a Space Crusade Chaos Marine. He's painted up to match the Space Crusade Dread from last time. Not much to say about him other than that really. Like the other Space Crusade models, it's nice and chunky, so it's simple to paint. Really happy with the base too. It's really just some bits of plasticard, but I think it sells the whole Space Crusade vibe. Finally, I have this Eldar chap that was sent in along with the Space Fleet ships by Seamus, so a big thank you to Seamus. He's supposed to be a musician and was originally sold under the name Tal Spellsinger in 1988, although I'll forgive you if you look at him and don't think musician. I actually really like the style of this mini, all the pipes going into his helmet that lead from what I assume is the Eldar equivalent of a bagpipe, being unreasonably loaded down with 3 weapons on top of his instrument. It's great. I painted it in Alatok? Is that how you pronounce it? Alatok? Anyway, I painted it in Alatok colours since it just seemed like a fun scheme to try. Plus, it means I can paint yellow, and since I found that nice recipe for yellow, I'd take any excuse to do it these days. But yeah, fun mini. No idea how you'd use it nowadays. A Legends Bone Singer, maybe? Would have to ignore the hand flamer and pistol he's got, though. So, I painted 36 models over the last 2 months, which is quite a few for me, and that included a few which weren't made by Games Workshop too. And how do my totals look? Well, I've painted 109 models against 109 bought, so at long last I have finally caught up. I should start pulling ahead now since I don't actually have any plans to buy anything else at the moment. Famous last words, I know, but legit I don't want to buy anything more for my grots until I get a chance to play with them a bit in 9th and see what holes need plugging, and everything else is on hold anyway. So yeah, I will see you next time. See, the cool thing about ukulele is you only actually have to know like 3 chords and you look like you know how to play it.